There's a dangerous idea that lurks in the background of modern life, a belief that shapes our actions, our societies, and even our very identities. It's a belief so ingrained in us, we hardly notice it. This belief tells us that control is the key to success, happiness, and security. The more control we have, the stronger we are. It's something we've been taught from the moment we're born. Control your destiny. Control your emotions. Control your surroundings. Control, control, control. It's an obsession that runs deep in the human psyche. But what if I told you that the very thing you believe to be your greatest strength is actually your greatest weakness? Imagine for a moment control is a myth, a fragile illusion. The more we chase it, the more it slips through our fingers. It's like trying to hold onto water with a clenched fist. The harder you squeeze, the more you lose. The truth is, control is not the fortress we think it is. It is the trap we fall into. To understand this, we must first look at the human need for control. Why is it that we are so desperate to shape the world around us? Why do we spend our lives trying to manipulate the circumstances, people, and even our own thoughts to fit a narrow mold? The truth is, control makes us feel safe. It promises stability in a world that is, at its core, unpredictable and chaotic. But this craving for control has consequences. It gives rise to societal structures that manipulate, dominate, and oppress. It feeds into power systems that exploit our deepest fears, and it distorts the way we interact with the world and with each other. Throughout history, control has been the silent force behind some of the darkest moments in human civilization. It has been the driving force behind totalitarian regimes, wars, and the exploitation of entire populations. And today, it remains the unseen hand that pulls the strings of politics, economics, and media. The desire for control isn't just personal, it's societal, and it's everywhere. But let's pause for a moment and ask, where does this desire for control come from? Why do we crave it so desperately? Is it truly power that we seek? Or is it something deeper, a desire for security, for certainty, for something we can hold onto in an unpredictable world? At its core, the desire for control stems from fear. Fear of chaos, fear of the unknown, fear of losing what little stability we have. And in this fear, we build walls of control to shield ourselves from the world. But these walls are not as sturdy as we think. They crumble under pressure, and when they do, we find ourselves not with more control, but with more anxiety, more conflict, and more manipulation. The reality is this: the more we cling to control, the more it slips away from us. The more we chase it, the more we become its prisoner. In the end, the illusion of control is not something we can conquer. It is something that conquers us. And the sooner we come to terms with this, the sooner we can begin to break free from its grip. This is the paradox at the heart of our modern world. The more we try to control, the more we lose. The more we try to secure our futures, the more uncertain they become. The more we seek to shape others, the more we distort ourselves. Control, in the end, is a dangerous desire. It is a trap, and it is the very thing that makes us weak. But if control is an illusion, what is the alternative? How do we navigate a world that seems so chaotic and uncontrollable? The answer is not as simple as relinquishing all control. It is about understanding the deeper forces at play. It is about recognizing that the true power lies not in holding onto control, but in letting go, in embracing uncertainty, in accepting the things we cannot change, and in trusting ourselves to move through life without the need to manipulate every outcome. As we embark on this journey, we will peel back the layers of this illusion. We'll dive into the psychology behind control, explore its historical roots, and examine how it affects our societies and personal lives. And ultimately, we'll ask ourselves one crucial question: what happens when we stop chasing control and start embracing the unknown? The answer might just be the key to understanding not only the world around us, but also our deepest selves. So let's begin to understand the devastating consequences of the desire for control. We must turn our gaze backward into the darkest corners of history. Throughout time, the pursuit of control has shaped civilizations, empires, and power structures in ways that continue to echo in our world today. We often think of power as something grand and visible, the rulers, the leaders, the systems that govern us. But control, at its heart, is far more insidious than that. It is the foundation upon which some of the most horrifying regimes in history were built. Take, for example, the rise of Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler. Hitler's obsession with control extended beyond the political. It was ideological, cultural, and deeply psychological. His desire for control was not merely about power, it was about creating a world that fit his twisted vision. A world where people could be categorized, classified, and ultimately manipulated into obedient subjects. He convinced an entire nation to surrender their will to the idea of order, an order that, in reality, was born from chaos and madness. He promised security through total control, even if that meant erasing the very essence of human freedom. The Nazi regime, driven by Hitler's pathological need for control, is perhaps the most brutal example of how this desire manifests in totalitarianism. But it is far from the only one. Consider Joseph Stalin's Soviet Russia, another regime built on the notion that control was the only way to secure a nation. Stalin's desire for control didn't just affect his personal ambition, it shaped the entire framework of Soviet society. Under his rule, millions were persecuted, tortured, and executed, all in the name of securing a perfect society, a society where every element could be controlled, from the individual's thoughts to the structure of the state. The same patterns are visible in the colonial powers that once dominated much of the world. Empires like Britain, Spain, and France pursued control not only for economic gain, but as a form of dominance over entire peoples. Their need for control over territories, resources, and populations led to centuries of violence, enslavement, and exploitation. Control, they believed, was the path to progress. But this so-called progress came at the expense of countless lives, cultures, and identities. So, what is it about the desire for control that leads to such abuses of power? It is not just a need for domination, but a deep-seated psychological response, a coping mechanism for those who believe that without control, society would fall apart. Leaders throughout history, from Hitler to Stalin to the colonial elites, justified their iron grip on power as a necessary measure to prevent chaos, instability, and disorder. They saw control as a balm for their own fears of losing authority, of failing to maintain order, of facing the unpredictable nature of human behavior. This need for control often emerges from personal insecurity, a fear of losing power, and the structures that one believes keep society in check. For those in power, control becomes a defense mechanism against their own anxiety. And this anxiety is contagious. When leaders embrace this need for control, it trickles down to the very fabric of society. People begin to believe that without strict oversight, without surveillance, without regulations, they will descend into disorder. They begin to internalize the idea that their very survival depends on the enforcement of control, whether it is through laws, surveillance, or propaganda. But what happens when that control is abused, when it is wielded not for order, but for oppression? The effects are catastrophic. History has shown us time and again that when control is concentrated in the hands of a few, the consequences are dire. In Nazi Germany, it led to the Holocaust, a systematic genocide that erased millions of lives in the pursuit of a racially pure state. In Stalin's Russia, it led to purges, forced labor camps, and the mass murder of political dissidents. In the colonial empires, it led to the brutal subjugation of entire populations, their lands stripped, their cultures erased, all in the name of civilization. And yet, these historical figures and regimes were not blind to the suffering they knew the costs, but they rationalized them as necessary evils for the greater good, the creation of a perfect society, a flawless system, a world that could be controlled. In their minds, the end justified the means. The fear of chaos, of losing control, outweighed the value of human life. This is the dangerous myth of control, that it can create order without consequence, that it can shield us from the unpredictable forces of the world. In reality, control never works in this way. It doesn't shield us, it suffocates us. What's more disturbing is that the patterns of history are not isolated events. They reverberate into the present day. When we look at modern society, we can still see the shadow of these historical regimes, playing out in more subtle ways, but no less insidious. Today, control manifests in more sophisticated forms: surveillance, media manipulation, and the relentless march of technology. Governments, corporations, and powerful institutions continue to use control as a means to maintain dominance. They shape public opinion, manipulate emotions, and manufacture consent, all in the name of order, security, and stability. Take the rise of surveillance states, where governments monitor and regulate citizens' every move under the guise of security. This desire to control is justified by the promise of safety. But at what cost? The erosion of privacy, the suppression of dissent, and the stripping away of individual freedoms. In the same way that Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia used propaganda to control the masses, modern societies rely on media to shape public opinion, to construct narratives, and to create a manufactured reality where those in power hold the reins. This modern form of control is more covert, more subtle, but no less effective. It's easier to control people through their desires, their beliefs, and their fears than through overt oppression. And much like the totalitarian regimes of the past, those who hold the power believe that this control is necessary for the greater good: security, order, progress. But just as history has shown, this belief is built on a dangerous lie. It is a lie that thrives on fear, insecurity, and the manipulation of our deepest vulnerabilities. So, as we look at the long arc of history, we must ask ourselves, are we repeating these mistakes? Are we allowing the same forces of control to shape our present and future? The pursuit of control may feel like the solution to our anxieties and uncertainties, but history teaches us that it is, in fact, the source of our most profound tragedies. The desire for control is not just a matter of power, it is a matter of human psychology, of our deepest fears and insecurities. And until we confront this desire, until we understand its roots and its dangers, we risk falling into the same traps that have ensnared humanity throughout history. In our modern world, the media is everywhere. It shapes our thoughts, influences our beliefs, and guides our actions. From the television screens in our homes to the social media platforms in our pockets, the media is a constant presence in our lives. But what if I told you that this pervasive influence isn't just a tool for information? What if the media, in all its forms, is also a master manipulator, carefully crafting an illusion of control to keep us locked in a cycle of fear, insecurity, and dependence? We often think of the media as a neutral force, a vehicle for news, entertainment, and communication. But in reality, the media is much more than that. It is one of the most powerful tools ever created for shaping public perception and influencing human behavior. In the hands of governments, corporations, and powerful institutions, it becomes a weapon used to manufacture consent, control the narrative, and create a false sense of reality. To understand how the media operates as a tool for control, we must first look at the concept of manufactured consent, a term coined by Edward Bernays, the father of public relations. Bernays recognized that modern society was no longer governed solely by direct force or coercion. Instead, control was achieved through the manipulation of mass communication. By using media to shape public opinion, elites could maintain their dominance without resorting to brute power. Bernays understood something profound about human nature. We are not as rational as we like to believe. Our decisions, our beliefs, and our actions are often guided by emotions, desires, and subconscious impulses. The media, by tapping into these psychological triggers, can subtly guide our thoughts and behaviors without us even realizing it. This is the essence of manufactured consent. It's not about persuading people directly, it's about creating an environment where the choices we make seem like our own, when in reality, they've been shaped by external forces. Take, for instance, political campaigns. Over the past century, politicians have relied heavily on media manipulation to win elections. The media isn't just about informing the public, it's about crafting a narrative, creating an image, and framing issues in ways that benefit those in power. In the early days of mass media, radio and television became platforms for political figures to present carefully constructed images of themselves. These images were designed to appeal to the emotional needs of the public, promising stability, hope, or change. The reality of their policies often took a back seat to the image they projected, because it was the image that voters connected with, not the substance. One of the most famous examples of this manipulation occurred during the 1960 U.S. presidential debates between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Kennedy's calm, charismatic presence on television contrasted sharply with Nixon's nervous, sweaty demeanor. Despite Nixon having more experience and a stronger political record, it was Kennedy's image shaped by the media that won over the public. This wasn't just a case of who was the better candidate. It was a case of who controlled the narrative, who controlled the visual presentation, and who could project the right image to win the public's trust. This process of media manipulation is not limited to politics. It extends into the world of advertising, where corporations spend billions of dollars to influence our purchasing decisions. At its core, advertising is about creating a sense of desire and emotional response that leads to action. Companies don't just sell products, they sell images of happiness, success, and fulfillment. They sell control over our lives, the promise that if we buy into their product, we'll achieve the life we've always wanted. This creates a powerful psychological dynamic. We begin to believe that buying the right product, consuming the right media, or aligning ourselves with the right cause will bring us the control we crave. In reality, it only deepens our dependence on external forces. This manufactured sense of control is even more pronounced in the digital age. With the rise of social media, control over public perception has become more subtle, more pervasive, and more personal. Social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are designed to create a sense of agency, an illusion that we are in control of our lives and our destinies. We curate our profiles, share our opinions, and engage with content that aligns with our beliefs. On the surface, it feels empowering. We have the power to shape our digital selves, to connect with others, and to amplify our voices. But underneath this surface lies a much darker truth. Social media is not a platform for freedom. It is a platform for control. The algorithms that govern these platforms are designed to keep us engaged, to keep us scrolling, to keep us coming back for more. They do this by exploiting our deepest insecurities, our desire for validation, and our need for approval. Every like, every comment, every share feeds into a psychological loop that makes us crave more. This is not a platform that offers us real control. It is one that controls us by exploiting our weaknesses. The content we consume on social media is carefully tailored to our preferences, but it is also designed to reinforce the status quo. We are shown what we want to see, not necessarily what we need to see. Our feeds are curated based on our past behavior, our likes, shares, and comments. This creates echo chambers, where we are surrounded by ideas and opinions that mirror our own. In this environment, we begin to believe that our views are universal, that they represent the truth, when in fact, they are simply reflections of the data we've generated. This illusion of control over our digital lives is a carefully orchestrated performance. We may feel empowered, but in reality, we are being controlled by the very systems we believe we're manipulating. This is the paradox at the heart of modern media. The more control we think we have over our lives, the more we are manipulated by forces outside our awareness. The media doesn't just reflect reality, it shapes it. It creates a narrative that we internalize, that we believe to be true, even when it's nothing more than a constructed illusion. And the more we buy into this illusion, the more we become trapped in the cycle of manipulation, convinced that we're in control when, in fact, we're simply puppets on a string. The media, in all its forms, doesn't just feed our desire for control, it exploits it. It amplifies our fears, our insecurities, and our deepest desires. Using them to shape our behavior and beliefs, it creates a false sense of agency, while tightening its grip on our actions. The result is a society where we are all desperately trying to maintain control, but in reality, it is the media that holds the reins. This is the illusion. We must confront the illusion that we are in control when, in fact, we are being controlled. The media, whether through political campaigns, advertising, or social media, exploits our desire for control, feeding us the false hope that we can shape our reality. But the truth is that the more we chase this illusion, the more we fall under its spell. The question we must ask ourselves is this: what happens when we stop seeking control? When we stop allowing the media to shape our perceptions? What happens when we reclaim our agency and see the world for what it truly is, not what we've been told it is? We live in a world that constantly pushes us to be in control. We are told that success, happiness, and fulfillment all hinge on our ability to manage, dominate, and direct our lives in precise ways. We strive for control over our careers, our relationships, our health, and even our emotions. Yet, in this constant pursuit, we often find ourselves trapped in a cycle of stress, burnout, and dissatisfaction. The very thing we seek control seems to slip through our fingers, leaving us more anxious and disillusioned than before. At the core of this struggle is a paradox. The more we try to control, the more out of control we feel. It is a dilemma that has haunted humanity for centuries, one that philosophers like Søren Kierkegaard and Albert Camus explored in their work. They argued that the human condition is, by nature, one of uncertainty, unpredictability, and anxiety. The desire to control is a response to this existential reality. We yearn for order in a chaotic world, for security in the face of the unknown. But in our attempt to impose control, we inadvertently create more chaos within ourselves. Take the example of a person striving for perfection in their career. They work relentlessly, pushing themselves to meet every expectation, to perform at the highest level, to be the best in their field. At first, this pursuit of control seems to yield rewards, promotions, recognition, success. But as the demands mount, so too does the pressure. The once rewarding work becomes a source of constant stress, and the fear of failure begins to erode their sense of self-worth. Despite their best efforts, they find themselves in a constant state of tension, unable to relax, unable to enjoy their achievements. The pursuit of control, instead of bringing peace, only brings frustration. The same pattern plays out in personal relationships. We often try to control how others perceive us, how they treat us, how they behave. We try to shape our relationships into something that aligns with our ideals, with our desires, with our sense of order. We become fixated on controlling the dynamics of our interactions, whether it's by manipulating the emotions of a partner, attempting to control the trajectory of a friendship, or imposing unrealistic expectations on family members. But when control becomes the driving force in relationships, it breeds resentment. The very people we seek to connect with are turned into objects to be managed, rather than individuals to be understood. Over time, the relationships we once cherished become fraught with tension, misunderstandings, and alienation. The more we try to control, the more we distance ourselves from true intimacy and connection. Even in the realm of personal habits, the pursuit of control often leads to harm. Consider the obsessive drive for self-discipline that many individuals embrace in an attempt to perfect their bodies, minds, or routines. They rigidly adhere to diets, exercise regimens, or daily routines, believing that by controlling every aspect of their lives, they can reach some ideal state of well-being. But over time, this compulsive need for control often leads to exhaustion, burnout, and a loss of joy. Instead of feeling empowered, they feel enslaved by their own rules. The constant striving for mastery becomes a source of self-inflicted punishment, rather than liberation. This paradox of control is not just a personal struggle. It is a reflection of the human condition itself. Kierkegaard, in his existential philosophy, described this tension as part of the anxiety of existence. For Kierkegaard, the anxiety we experience is rooted in the fact that we cannot fully control our lives. We are faced with the uncertainty of the future, the unpredictability of events, and the awareness of our own mortality. This awareness creates a profound existential tension, a deep fear of the unknown. Our desire for control is an attempt to mitigate that fear, to create a sense of order in the midst of chaos. Albert Camus, too, grappled with this notion in his philosophy of the absurd. He argued that life is inherently meaningless, that there is no grand design, no ultimate purpose to our existence. In the face of this absurdity, humans often strive for control, seeking to impose meaning and structure where none exists. But Camus saw this pursuit as futile, for it leads only to despair. He suggested that the only true freedom comes not from trying to control our lives, but from embracing the absurdity and relinquishing the need for control. It is only through acceptance of the uncertainty, the chaos, and the unpredictability of life that we can truly experience peace psychologically. The dangers of controlling behavior are well documented. Studies in the field of psychology have shown that the more we attempt to control our environment, the more stressed we become. This is known as control stress, a phenomenon where individuals feel a constant pressure to maintain control over their lives, their surroundings, and the people around them. Research has found that this type of stress can lead to a wide range of negative outcomes, including anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems such as hypertension and heart disease. The more we try to control, the more we exhaust ourselves physically and mentally. We become so consumed by the need for mastery that we lose sight of the bigger picture, the beauty of living in the moment, the freedom of uncertainty, and the joy of spontaneity. So, what is the alternative? How can we reconcile our need for control with the inherent unpredictability of life? The answer lies in the concept of letting go. Letting go does not mean abandoning responsibility or resigning ourselves to passivity. It means accepting that we cannot control everything, and that some aspects of life, our relationships, our careers, our emotions, will always be unpredictable. It means relinquishing the need to control outcomes and instead focusing on how we respond to the present moment. By letting go, we open ourselves up to the richness of experience, the freedom that comes from embracing uncertainty, and the peace that arises when we stop fighting against the flow of life. Consider the story of an individual who has spent years obsessively controlling their career, only to find that the more they pushed, the further they drifted from their true desires. One day, they decide to step back. They relinquish the need for constant achievement and allow themselves to pursue a path that feels more authentic. In doing so, they find greater satisfaction, a renewed sense of purpose, and a deeper connection to their work and to themselves. The paradox of control gives way to the liberation of letting go. In relationships, the act of letting go can be equally transformative. When we stop trying to control how others perceive us or how they behave, we create space for authentic connection. We stop imposing our expectations and start listening, truly listening, to the needs and desires of the people around us. This shift from control to acceptance can heal long-standing rifts, foster deeper intimacy, and restore the joy of being present with others. In our personal habits, too, the act of letting go offers profound benefits. Instead of obsessing over perfection, we learn to embrace imperfection. We accept that we are human, that we will make mistakes, and that this is part of the journey. By releasing the need for rigid control, we cultivate a sense of freedom from self-criticism, freedom from unrealistic expectations, and freedom from the constant pressure to be better. We become more flexible, more compassionate toward ourselves, and ultimately more at peace. The paradox of control is that the more we seek to master life, the more life masters us. But when we release the need to control, when we embrace uncertainty and imperfection, we find that we are no longer slaves to our desires. Instead, we become active participants in the flow of life, able to experience true freedom, peace, and satisfaction. The pursuit of control, far from making us stronger, often weakens us. It is in the letting go that we find our true strength. In a world increasingly dominated by technology, politics, and economic structures, the desire for control has taken on a new, more insidious form. Where once control was asserted through brute force or ideological conquest, today it operates under the guise of convenience, efficiency, and security. Yet, beneath this veneer of progress lies a chilling reality. The concentration of power is more profound than ever, and with it, the erosion of privacy, individual freedoms, and autonomy. Modern society has evolved into a highly centralized system, one in which the structures that govern us, be they political, economic, or technological, are tightly controlled by a select few. Political leaders, multinational corporations, and powerful technocrats wield unprecedented influence over the lives of millions, making decisions that affect everything from the food we eat to the information we consume. The desire for control, once associated with tyrannical rulers and oppressive regimes, is now embedded into the very systems that structure our daily lives. But what happens when this control is no longer about maintaining order, but about maintaining power? The modern political landscape is a prime example of this desire for control at its most extreme. In many countries, we see the increasing centralization of power within the hands of a few, often at the expense of democratic processes. In the name of national security, governments have expanded their surveillance capabilities to unprecedented levels. What was once a tool used to monitor potential threats has become a pervasive, all-encompassing system that tracks every aspect of our lives. From the data we generate through online activity to the biometric scans used to track our movements, surveillance has become the cornerstone of modern governance. Take, for example, the rise of mass data collection by governments and corporations. The act of collecting personal data is no longer a passive byproduct of using digital platforms. It has become an active tool for controlling and predicting behavior. This is not a mere coincidence. With each interaction we make, be it through social media, online shopping, or our search history, we are contributing to a vast database that can be mined for insights into our preferences, our weaknesses, and our desires. Governments and corporations then use this information to influence our decisions, shaping public opinion, swaying elections, and tailoring advertisements that push us towards specific products or ideologies. This is the essence of surveillance capitalism, using our data as a tool of control. At its core, the increasing surveillance and data-driven manipulation we are experiencing today are not just about monitoring us, they are about reshaping society itself. The more data is collected, the more it is used to predict and control human behavior. And the more society is conditioned to accept this, the less room there is for freedom or individuality. People become reduced to mere data points, and their behaviors and preferences become predictable, commodified, and ultimately controllable. The ethical implications of this are staggering. For one, the erosion of privacy is profound. The right to control one's own personal information has been slowly stripped away, leaving us vulnerable to manipulation in ways we scarcely understand. With every piece of data we surrender, we give up a little more of our autonomy, allowing external forces to shape our decisions. Our ability to think critically, to make independent choices, becomes compromised as we are nudged, coaxed, and even coerced into certain behaviors. What was once an act of free will becomes a series of responses to stimuli, carefully engineered to align with the interests of those in power. And it's not just about the erosion of privacy, it's also about the loss of true freedom. In a society where every aspect of our lives is subject to surveillance, where our movements, preferences, and even thoughts are cataloged and analyzed, what room remains for personal freedom? As we willingly surrender more of our lives to the watchful eyes of the state and corporations, we become trapped in a cycle of surveillance that is justified as a means of ensuring safety or enhancing convenience. But is it truly safe to live in a world where every action is monitored, where every decision is influenced by invisible forces? The notion of freedom itself becomes distorted as the boundaries between choice and manipulation blur beyond recognition. The rise of a technocratic elite further exacerbates this dynamic. This class of individuals, often highly educated and deeply embedded in the worlds of technology and finance, wields immense power over the direction of society. They are the ones who design the systems that track our every move, who build the algorithms that decide which content we see, and who control the flow of capital. In many ways, this new form of elite governance is more insidious than traditional forms of power, as it operates under the guise of innovation, progress, and efficiency. Rather than ruling through brute force, technocrats exercise control through subtle manipulation, quietly shaping the landscape of society without most people ever realizing it. In this new world order, the concept of progress becomes intrinsically linked to control. As technology advances, so too does our ability to control and monitor. From artificial intelligence that predicts our needs to the development of smart cities that monitor everything from traffic patterns to energy usage, the desire for control manifests in every facet of our lives. But at what cost? The rapid pace of technological innovation often outstrips our ability to understand the ethical implications of these advancements. What happens when surveillance becomes ubiquitous, when our every move is tracked and analyzed? The answer may lie in the dystopian future that many have warned about, a future in which individual freedoms are sacrificed on the altar of security, and where the very fabric of society is held together by invisible strings of control. We can look to history for examples of how the desire for control in modern systems parallels the rise of oppressive regimes in the past. Totalitarian states like Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were built on the same principles of centralized power and surveillance. In both cases, the governments justified their control over society as a means of maintaining order, security, and progress. But as we now know, the reality was far darker. The people of these regimes were subject to constant surveillance, their every action scrutinized, their every movement controlled. And while the technology available at the time may have been primitive by today's standards, the principles were the same: control through observation, manipulation, and repression. In many ways, we are living through a modern version of this same phenomenon. While the tools of control may have evolved, the underlying principles remain unchanged. Today, we face a world in which power is increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few, and where surveillance and technology are used to maintain that power. The question we must ask ourselves is this: what will we allow in the name of safety, security, and convenience? Will we continue to sacrifice our freedoms in exchange for the illusion of control? And perhaps most importantly, at what point do we draw the line before we lose what makes us human in the first place? In the age of surveillance capitalism, the desire for control no longer belongs to just a few rulers or dictators. It belongs to the systems that govern us all. The question then is not just about who holds the power, but about how far we will let them go in their quest to control every aspect of our lives. The true cost of control may not be visible today, but as we move further into this new era, we must confront the reality that our desire for control may, in the end, be the very thing that costs us our freedom. As we come to the end of this journey, it's time to turn inward. We've seen how the desire for control manifests in our societies, in our histories, and in our modern systems. But now, it's time to ask the most important question of all. How does this obsession with control affect us individually? And what is the price we pay for holding so tightly to the illusion that we can control our world? When we think about control, we often associate it with strength, grasping the reins of life, forcing outcomes to match our desires. We convince ourselves that the more we control, the better we can protect ourselves from the chaos that lurks around every corner. Yet, the reality is far more complex. The pursuit of control can be an exhausting and alienating force, one that imprisons us in an endless cycle of stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. The more we try to grasp control, the more elusive it becomes, and the more it slips through our fingers, the more desperate our attempts grow. In our personal lives, control often manifests in the relationships we try to dominate, the careers we strive to perfect, and the habits we try to impose on ourselves. We obsess over every detail, every conversation, every decision, every move. We plan, we organize, we micromanage. We believe that if we can just control everything, we will finally achieve peace, happiness, and success. But the truth is this: relentless pursuit of control often leads to the opposite: chaos, frustration, and burnout. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Think about the areas where you've tried to assert control, only to find yourself drained and disillusioned. Perhaps it's in your relationships where your attempts to shape others' behavior create tension and resentment. Maybe it's in your work life where striving for perfection leaves you feeling constantly inadequate, or it could be in the small, daily habits where the desire for self-discipline spirals into an obsessive need to manage every aspect of your life. How much energy have you expended trying to maintain control over things that are, in reality, beyond your grasp? And how much of your true self have you sacrificed in the process? This constant need to control is not only personally draining, but also creates a false sense of security. It tricks us into thinking that if we can just manage every outcome, we will be safe, secure, and in control of our destiny. But as life relentlessly proves, the future is filled with uncertainties. The more we cling to control, the more we isolate ourselves from the beauty of the unknown, the very uncertainty that makes life vibrant, creative, and full of possibility. So, what is the alternative? How can we begin to let go of control without feeling vulnerable or lost? The answer lies in the wisdom of the ages, philosophies, and traditions that have long understood the paradox of control. By surrendering control, we actually unlock a deeper, more authentic strength. Stoicism, for example, teaches us to focus only on what is within our control: our thoughts, our responses, our actions, and to let go of the rest. The Stoics believed that the key to true peace and resilience was not in attempting to control the uncontrollable, but in accepting the natural flow of life. They argued that we cannot control the events of the world, but we can control how we respond to them. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Similarly, Buddhism offers profound insights into the nature of control. Central to Buddhist teachings is the idea that suffering arises from attachment. Attachment to people, things, and yes, even the desire for control. According to Buddhist philosophy, true peace comes not from trying to manipulate our circumstances, but from learning to accept life as it is. The Buddha taught that by letting go of our attachments, we free ourselves from the cycle of suffering. We stop trying to hold the world in place and instead learn to flow with it. By embracing the impermanence of life, we can find a deep sense of freedom in surrendering control. Even existential philosophers like Søren Kierkegaard and Jean-Paul Sartre understood the need to confront the limits of human control. For Kierkegaard, the leap of faith was essential in facing the uncertainties of life. He argued that our desire for control is ultimately a form of anxiety, a desperate attempt to create meaning in a world that resists it. The existentialists, in their search for authenticity, encouraged us to embrace uncertainty and take ownership of our choices, not in a world where everything can be controlled, but in a world where freedom lies in the acceptance of life's unpredictability. These traditions point to an uncomfortable yet liberating truth. Control is not the path to strength, but rather to vulnerability. True strength lies in our ability to accept uncertainty, to let go of our need for certainty, and to find peace in the midst of chaos. The more we hold on to control, the more we close ourselves off from the rich, unpredictable experiences that make life meaningful. By releasing control, we open ourselves up to growth, to new opportunities, and to the simple beauty of being alive. But this isn't just a personal matter. The desire for control isn't just something that plagues individuals. It's embedded in the systems and structures of our society. From political regimes that suppress dissent to corporate systems that manipulate consumer behavior, the pursuit of control has shaped much of the world we live in. To create a more just and equitable society, we must first confront our collective addiction to control. Collective action begins with a collective recognition that the systems we've built are based on a false assumption that control is possible and that it is desirable. Whether in the workplace, the government, or the marketplace, the systems that dominate our lives are built on the premise that we can and should control everything. But this worldview is flawed, and it is one that has caused untold harm. To truly transform society, we must be willing to embrace uncertainty not as a threat, but as an opportunity. We must let go of the rigid structures that limit human potential and create more flexible, compassionate systems that honor the unpredictability of life. Only then can we begin to build a society that values freedom, individuality, and cooperation over control, domination, and fear. So, What does this mean for you? As an individual, it means letting go of the small, everyday attempts to control your life and the lives of others. It means accepting that uncertainty is not something to fear, but something to embrace. It means choosing vulnerability over rigidity and flow over force. It means challenging the systems that seek to dominate us and finding new ways to live that are more aligned with the complexities and uncertainties of the world we inhabit. In the end, the greatest strength comes not from controlling every aspect of our lives, but from accepting that we cannot control everything, and that, in that acceptance, we find true freedom. Embrace uncertainty, let go of control, live with intention, and watch the world unfold before you in ways you never imagined possible. Throughout this exploration, we've journeyed through the powerful and pervasive force of control, examining its psychological roots, its historical manifestations, its manipulation through media, and its often destructive consequences in our personal lives and modern systems. From the iron-fisted regimes of the past to the subtle yet all-encompassing digital surveillance of today, we've seen how control has shaped, distorted, and governed much of human existence. But as we've delved deeper, we've uncovered an uncomfortable truth. The pursuit of control is not the path to freedom, but a trap that keeps us bound in cycles of fear, isolation, and dissatisfaction. We've witnessed how the desire for control, when taken to extremes, leads to tyranny, whether in the form of totalitarian regimes or corporate power structures that manipulate masses for profit. We've explored how modern media creates a false sense of control, manufacturing consent, and feeding us narratives that pacify our deeper needs for agency and autonomy. And on a personal level, we've recognized how our relentless need for control over our relationships, our careers, and our habits often spirals into stress, anxiety, and a constant sense of inadequacy. Yet, in all of this, we find that there is an alternative, a different way to engage with the world. True liberation does not come from clinging to control, but from releasing it. It comes from accepting that life is inherently uncertain, that chaos is not something to fear but to embrace, whether through the wisdom of Stoicism, Buddhism, or existential philosophy. We've seen that strength lies in surrendering the need for certainty and learning to navigate a world full of unknowns. The key, however, is not simply personal acceptance. This is not merely a call to find inner peace, but to understand the broader societal implications of our desire for control. The systems we live in, political, economic, and technological, are all built on the premise that control is possible, desirable, and necessary. But we must ask ourselves, what are we sacrificing in this pursuit of control? What freedoms are we losing? What power are we giving away to those who promise safety and security in exchange for our compliance? In the end, breaking free from the illusion of control is a revolutionary act, one that not only frees the individual, but also holds the potential to transform society itself. It is a call to stop conforming to systems that value control over human connection, predictability over diversity, and fear over love. It is a challenge to embrace the messiness of life, to welcome its unpredictability, and to move beyond the false comfort of control. It is an invitation to reconnect with what is truly meaningful, our capacity for compassion, creativity, and shared freedom. The truth is that we cannot control everything. The more we try, the more we lose ourselves to the very systems we seek to master. But by embracing uncertainty, by letting go of our need to dominate and dictate, we open ourselves to a new world, a world of possibility, growth, and liberation. So, what is your role in all of this? The first step is simple. Question your relationship with control. Ask yourself where it shows up in your life, whether in your career, your relationships, or your view of the world. Recognize the toll it takes. Then, begin to let go. Let go of the small things, the constant need to plan every detail, to manipulate outcomes, to predict every move. And let go of the larger things, the systems and structures that make you feel powerless, but also demand your submission. As you do this, you may find that the world opens up in ways you never expected. By embracing the unknown, you might discover that what you've been seeking, peace, freedom, fulfillment, was never in control at all. It was in the chaos. It was in the acceptance It was in the liberation that comes from letting go. This is not a call to resignation, but a call to action. It's a call to break free from the illusions that bind us to live more authentically, to resist the forces that seek to control us, and to embrace the uncertainty that makes life worth living. The time has come to release control, to live in the moment, and to take the first steps toward a freer, more compassionate world. We do not need control. What we need is the courage to embrace the unknown and the wisdom to navigate it with grace.